Really get into this. How many classic projects does he have? Honestly, because people be saying he's top 5. So
you know what? I'm going to tell you this, bro.
now we're going to change the subject.
No, we're not. To even ask that question.
For me,
I want to just know you. I want to know.
Disrespectful.
I just want to know though.
Illmatic.
That's
for me.
one.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
for me,
it.
It's Illmatic.
That's it.
Okay, give me Future. Give me Future.
Future has
You better
put
not
out
say
9
that's
projects in a row. That's all hit.
It doesn't have
You
to
better not
always
say
be
they're classics.
quality.
Dirty Sprite 2 is one of the best albums
Have
ever.
you heard of quality
You can
versus
see Future at a
quantity?
real
36
street
Nights, one of
fest.
the best mixtapes ever.
Oh my
Like,
god.
what are we talking about here?
I am so glad that this happened. And before you boomers and 17-year-olds trying to impress every old head out there lose your shit, I don't like Future. I don't think the dude can rhyme. I sort of get his artistic appeal because it's really all about the sound with Future, and I can kind of guess why people like it if you just focus on the sound, because sometimes the sound does sound really good. I actually do really like 56 Nights for some reason. But overall, Future just isn't for me. It's just not my cup of tea. And I do think overall, at this point in 2019, Lonzo is wrong here. Future does not have more classic albums than Nas at this point in time. But if we kind of change the wording and change albums to projects, in a few years' times, maybe next decade, late next decade, Lonzo Ball might be onto something here. And the reason for that is because a classic doesn't always mean quality. Just because you hate something doesn't mean you can negate its classic status. You can hate Illmatic. If a person thinks Illmatic isn't a classic, you know you're speaking to a dumbass, because it is so clear to see Illmatic's impact that if someone says it isn't a classic, you're literally just fucking wrong. And even though I don't really like Future, I don't like that. It's kind of hard to say that hasn't had a huge impact in hip hop today, and that maybe down the line, multiple Future projects might be considered classic. Nas to me has 2 classic, and those are obviously Illmatic and It Was Written. Illmatic was just a huge part of what East Coast hip hop was, and it was such a staple to the quality that people wanted to reach back then and even today's standards. So it is clearly a classic for that, for its importance. And it was written as a classic because it was such a huge part of mafioso rap, which was such a huge subgenre in the 90s, filled with cats like Raekwon, Cool G Rap, Biggie, and of course Nas himself. And he really helped to shape that subgenre. I don't think he has any more classics than that. Some people say Stillmatic is a classic because Ether is in there, but a lot of people don't think Ether has even aged that well as a song, even though I still love Ether. As a full project, even though it's a great project, I don't think Stillmatic has classic status behind it. So he has 2 classic albums. Now in Future's hand, I still think he has 0 classics. But the reason for that is because I'm kind of a hard ass when it comes to giving classic projects. I don't like throwing the word around a lot. And I like waiting the 8 to 10 years just to see if the album stands the test of time, if it's still relevant, if it's still talked about way 8 to 10 years after its release. So I'm kind of a hard ass with that. But it's hard to think that DS2 at some point won't be considered a classic. To me, when it comes to Future, he sort of started a lot of the whole mumble, rap, trap kind of sound. And when he first came out, he sold pretty decently, but it wasn't as much as he's selling now. And he sort of came out and he got attention, but it wasn't full-blown, attention that Future's getting now. And it sort of seems that he came out and other cats started to copy him a lot like Cardi, Lil Baby, and obviously fucking Designer. So when DS2 came out, it sort of seemed like the whole trap, mumble rap that Future created came back to him, and he started really getting the recognition that he deserved because all these cats were kind of copying him, and then he came out and put a quote-unquote stellar album in the eyes of trap fans. And that really solidified the whole mumble rap sound. And I feel like ever since then, trap music just continues to grow bigger and bigger and faster. It seems like trap music just changes a lot very quickly. And I feel like it's hard to picture a world, especially years down the line, where DS2 isn't going to continue to be talked about, because it's still being talked about to this day. And I think it will stand the test of time to the point where even if you don't like trap music, you sort of have to realize that it's a classic album, just based on how important and influential it was. So besides DS2, I'm not sure if Future will have another classic album per se, but when it came to his whole 2015 through 2016 run, he dropped Beast Mode, Monster, and 56 Nights, like I said. And it's also hard to think that either one or even 2 of those mixtapes might be considered classic one day. And a lot of people try to differentiate classic mixtapes and classic albums as these very 2 different things. And I might agree with you, and I feel like you kind of have to agree when it comes back to maybe in previous decades, maybe in the whole Lil Wayne era, because it really seemed like mixtapes were just projects where people rapped over other people's beats and try to outdo them, try to make it sound better. And that's something that Lil Wayne did very well. But nowadays, the line between mixtape and album grows thinner by the year. It really seems like the only difference between mixtapes and albums is sort of the promotion and the overall attention that they get. But in terms of sound and importance, I feel like mixtapes and albums carry a lot of the same weight. So people like to tell you that well, in terms of classic, it's very different to have a classic album and a classic mixtape. And again, I might agree with you if it was 10, 15 years ago, but now in 2019, it seems like mixtapes and albums carry a lot of the same weight. And I sort of am starting to grow to have classic mixtapes and classic albums be held to the same standard. And I do think that Monster and 56 Nights and maybe even Beast Mode, even though I think Beast Mode really isn't that good at all, will eventually, I might be wrong, but might eventually have that classic status mixtape because it is very influential. And when people talk about Future's run, the mixtapes get talked about just as much as DS2, if not maybe even more, because that's really the start and the threshold when people just saw Future just get a huge rise where people just continue to copy everything that he was making. What I personally think will be a big reason why a lot of rap fans, especially old heads, will have a hard time defining an album like DS2 or 56 Nights or Monster as a classic is due to the reason that a lot of old heads don't like trap music. But like I said before, my very first point, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you can't deny that something is classic. I sort of see trap music a lot as the new metal of when it comes to rap. Not in terms of quality, because trap definitely is way better than new metal. But new metal in this day and age doesn't really seem to get that much respect. And a lot of metalheads just kind of throw off new metal to the side whenever they speak about metal subgenres. And that's kind of how old heads look at trap. They look at trap and they just automatically call it trash and they toss it to the side and they say, oh, that's not really rap music or whatever, which is complete bullshit. And that's how a lot of metal fans, traditional metal fans, feel towards new metal. But even if you're a metalhead and you don't like new metal, you have to at least recognize the impact that bands like Slipknot and Korn and even a little bit of System of a Down had when it came to metal and when it came to pushing metal into the 21st century. And those bands, at the end of the day, even though I don't like them a lot, except for System of a Down, I actually quite like them a little bit, you still have to respect what they did, even if, again, you don't think the quality of music is that good, because it can still be classic. So yeah, let's stop pretending like classic albums are all that matters and all that we need to talk about, because we might very well one day live in a world where Future has more classic projects when you count his mixtapes than Nas, because again, classics aren't always filled with quality. And to me, Future will never reach the level of importance, and more importantly, the level of quality of music as Nas. I still think that even some of Nas's weaker efforts heavily outdo some of Future's best projects, and that's because Nas is a way better rapper, way better songwriter, way better musician in terms of my eyes. But at the end of the day, they might have the equal amount of classic projects because classic projects dictate how much a genre changed or how it impacted a certain sound, not necessarily quality. So yeah, let's talk about different shit. Let's talk about the actual quality of the music, and let's hold quality to a higher standard than classic. Like, please, because there's a lot of shitty classic albums out there. And especially with trap music becoming so huge, there might be a lot of classic trap albums that really just aren't that high in quality, because I like trap music, but it's not necessarily my favorite rap subgenre. So yeah, I feel like us as rap fans, we should be looking at quality before classic. Because personally, I want to listen to quality music, not necessarily something that changed the game. Because at the end of the day, I don't listen to music because I think, oh wow, this is so influential and this is so important. Like, fuck that. I just want to listen to something that's good, and that should be the highest standard. So for real, let's stop talking about classic albums for a little bit and just talk about quality music. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. Please let me know your thoughts on classic albums, how you feel about what Lonzo said about Future, about Nas. And yeah, I'll be with y'all very soon. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and I'll be with y'all real soon. All right? Peace.